6 o'clock, and we'll go ahead and call this meeting of the Jefferson County Board of Education regular meeting on Monday, July 13th to order. And Dr. Gibson, would you mind sharing the pledge with us? And if you'd please join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right. Item number 2, Madam Superintendent, Jefferson County Reentry Plan Review. As of 6:01 on Monday, July 13th. Go.
Yes, ma'am. I actually expect that perhaps by 6:05 it may be different. But thank you everybody for tuning in. I have some information to give everyone this evening. It has been quite a journey. For folks who may not be aware, we've been working with a pretty significant number of people. Altogether, we have over 57,000 citizens in this county. We have over 8,900 students, and we have nearly 1,200 staff, and every one of them has very, very strong opinions and ideas about what they would like to see in this plan. Our committees have been working for a little over 2 months now, based on the guidance that we received at the time that seems to change regularly. So a couple of concepts that I want to make sure that we lay the groundwork with before I start talking about some specifics. First and foremost, the most important thing that you can hear when I say draft reentry plan is the draft portion of that. Okay, I am going to talk a little bit about the number of changes that have been made just in the last week, and they've been pretty significant. So what you see today is exactly today, this moment, based on the information that we have, and there is always going to be an update when we get new information. So we've committed to every 2 weeks at this school board meeting, we will have the reentry plan on the agenda. Any changes since the previous plan, either based on our experience, based on a state mandate, based on a suggestion from a parent or a staff person, we will communicate at that meeting. We also have, thank you very much, Mr. Fogel, up on our website, a Jefferson County Schools reentry plan section. At the top of that website, it contains a special highlighted red blurb that says, alert, these things have changed based on this mandate as of this day, as of this time, so that you can keep up while there are changes. We recognize, trust and believe that it is frustrating, when you would like a clear, solid, unchanging answer so that you can rely on that and make your plans based on that. We will give you all of the things that we know right now and that we are working towards. There are things that we don't control that may change these, but we will tell you as soon as we know them, and we will tell you exactly how we plan on adjusting to them, okay? So draft is very important. The second thing to remember about this plan is when we are talking about 10,000 plus individuals, students and staff, then add on to that another several thousand guardians and families, we will not make everyone in here happy. We will not. Someone with this plan is going to be utterly incensed that we did not create something that was within their specifications. We are going to offer you as much personal choice as is possible under the circumstances. That's for staff, that's for students, that's for their families. Okay, we understand and support that folks need to make individual choices based on their situation. And we will give as many options as we feasibly, legally, logistically, financially can under those circumstances. All right. So with all of those caveats given, there are a couple of things that we have had to make adjustments on in the last 2 weeks. The West Virginia Department of Education came out to just the county superintendents with a reentry plan with guidance for us. We met 2 weeks ago, and we were told that the governor would be signing this reentry plan at a press conference. And about an hour and a half before the press conference, we were called back in and told that the governor had released Dr. Slimp and that the WVDE plan had been approved by Dr. Slimp. So it was being drawn back and that it would be revamped for approval by the new director of DHHR. So fast forward 3 work days from that, and the governor comes out and says the previous guidance around PPE had been communicated to us. That guidance changed, and he made the public announcement, which applies to schools currently, that face coverings are mandatory on individuals over the age of 9. So we've had to make some adjustments to our plan based on that. 2 days after that, he comes out and says, and all West Virginia public schools are mandated to have a start date of September the 8th. And according to the West Virginia Department of Education, has secondarily mandated that we must conclude school by June 1st. And within that period, get in the federal and state mandated number of instructional minutes. So as all of you know, our calendar began nearly 3 weeks before that, actually a full 3 weeks before that for our staff. We now have to recreate our calendar and submit that to the school board for approval. 2 days after that, the West Virginia School Sports Authority Conference, WVSSAC, I can't even tell you what all those are, came out and changed their guidance for summer play and fall sports. We have already several weeks ago released the last guidance document for return to play for sports and return to play for band. Those will all need to be altered based on the new guidance, which WVSSAC is forthcoming, but we have not received yet. And finally, as of late Thursday, having made not all of those, but some of those changes, we met with the Jefferson County Health Department, who, heaven love them, they have been under an equal amount, if not more, duress and changing guidelines. They reviewed our plan, and they have responsibility for the section of our plan that outlines contact tracing, which essentially is what is the protocol for schools, for staff, for parents, and for students when an individual is found to be actively positive for the COVID virus. As the medical professionals in our community, as the ones who receive the updates and the information from DHHR, from CDC, it is very important that the individuals with that expertise make those decisions. They have been working on that. They have approved our deep cleaning plan. Thank you so much, Joyce White. Thank you so much, Brandon Caton. They worked very hard to put together a very good plan that has been approved by JCHD for the deep cleaning in the schools. We have not, however, as of right now, 6/10, do not have the contact tracing protocol to include in our plan. When we do receive that, we expect to receive it shortly and to include that in our overall plan that we release to the public. So those are things that have to be responded to and have to be changed just within announcements for the last week. So I cannot communicate to you enough that as things change, we will change our plan and we will come back out with revisions. So if there is something that you believe could be done better, or you would like us to do differently, we strongly encourage you, if you go onto our website, there is a link for you to be able to submit suggestions and ideas to us. We hope that you use it. We also have a thought exchange out in which you can submit ideas and other community members can rate those and give us feedback about whether or not that's something that the majority would prefer. Please, please, please use those to the greatest extent possible. Also, during this meeting and during all of our school board meetings, while we're utilizing the Zoom tool, there is a chat tool at the bottom of your Zoom box, and that allows you to provide input. We'll be taking questions at the end of this, and to the extent possible, we will be answering them if they're known things. They may be things that there remains some question about, or they may be suggestions that you have. Mr. Hans Vogel is the facilitator, and he will be taking those questions and collating them for a public FAQ to go out about reentry. So, having said all of that, there are a couple of things, even with all of those changes, that are reliable that we can convey to people to make sure that everyone is very clear. Number one, we have had a number of questions regarding virtual, and we will be releasing later on this week, beginning of next week, depending on some information from the West Virginia Department of Education, a brochure and guidance regarding virtual and what that looks like. There is a very widespread misunderstanding that what parents experienced in the spring was virtual. That was not virtual. As I heard in my meeting this morning with the WVSS PA and the AFT and the WVEA representatives, that was crisis teaching, right? That looks very different than our regular ongoing virtual program. So we have some parents who have expressed some concerns about virtual because of their experience in the spring. If they were not in our virtual programs from the beginning of the year, our assigned virtual programs, they have not experienced our virtual program. Our virtual program has a curriculum. It has an accountability measure to it. It has a regular class schedule, which you must attend, and there is mandatory attendance and accountability. There is testing in those. There is tutoring in those. That virtual program operates quite differently than the one that was, quote unquote crisis teaching during the spring. So we will have that information out, and we would strongly suggest that as parents and as teachers, you review that document so that you can make an informed decision about virtual school and whether or not that's a good choice for your child. The next thing that I can say is that we have received a lot of feedback, concern about the announcement that we would be holding school 5 days per week. There is some misunderstanding that translates into business as usual. It is anything but. It will not look like the school that you left. We will have reduced class sizes. We are accomplishing that through a number of different means. We will not be having lunches in the cafeteria. Those will be delivered so we can use that classroom space. We will be holding class in the library. We will not have children out and rotating through the library. We will be holding class to a limited extent in the gymnasium. We will be utilizing spaces that currently are congregate spaces as classroom spaces in order to socially distance students. In addition, we will be utilizing our teaching and our service staff scheduled differently. For example, Right now, one of the ways in which we are reducing exposure for high school students is we are moving from a 7-period day schedule to a block schedule, which means students would only go to 4 classes a day and stay in there for a much longer period, so they get 2 days worth of work, and then the next day they go to their other 4 classes. That means that we've cut their transitions where they are in the hallway or exposed to a different set of students by more than half. It also means that while teachers previously would have had their planning in the middle of the day, they are now freed up during their planning period to pull students and reduce class sizes. So there are a number of things that we've done to reduce class sizes so that we can increase social distancing. Another one of the things that we've done is we've also worked through not just space and not just staffing, but safety features. One of the things that we hear from folks, and of course their biggest concern, is what things are you putting into place? How will school look different when we return, so that I have some idea of the safety. So number one, schools right now, while we keep kids secure, we have a number of security features, and those security features have been based on mostly keeping intruders out. A lot of that now is going to be tightened in terms of keeping anyone out who we have not vetted for being medically not actively infected. And when I say that, what I mean is we will have, for every single one of our schools, automated face recognition temperature scanning, meaning that for every single individual who comes into our building, they will be scanned. If their temperature exceeds the CDC recommendation for fever, they will not be given entry into our building. No one is coming into that building that is actively feverish. That is one of the very important concepts in working with our health department, that we felt that it was important. Now, Joyce White and her staff have worked very hard. We have on order the number of machines to provide 3 at each high school, 2 at each middle school, and 1 at each elementary school. These machines scan several hundred people very quickly. It is a walkthrough. We also have handheld temperature scanners for all of our classrooms, so that if anyone believes that a child's become feverish during the day, they are able to scan them and send them to our nurses. So one of our biggest safety features is to keep anyone who is sick from entering the school. On that tact, we will also be employing a new remote visitor service at all of our schools, meaning there will not be visitors into the school. Jefferson County Schools staff who have gone through our security measures and who have our school issued protective equipment will be in the schools. If a parent comes to the school to drop something off, we will have a secure, no contact drop box outside for the parent to drop the item off. We will pick it up, disinfect it, and bring it to the child. If a child needs something to give to their parent, same thing, we'll drop it off outside. If someone comes in late, if someone needs to leave early, you will go to the buzzer, you will announce yourself as the guardian, you will show your ID to our camera, we will verify your ability to pick up or drop off your child, and someone will come to the door and they will retrieve them. We will not have individuals coming in and out of the school who are compromising or possibly compromising the safety of our students. We know that will be a big change for individuals. People like to come and sit and have lunch with their kids. They like to come and read to classes. And we love people being in our schools. We want to be a community school, but right now, our #1 job is to keep everyone safe. So we're putting in place those remote visitor service protocols. Another piece of it is actual equipment. I know all of you have heard the term PPE, personal protective equipment. We will have for all of our staff mandatory face coverings. We will be giving our staff choices regarding, they have a variety of those in different configurations, some of which are clear and allow for students to see facial expressions. This is particularly important for our very young students and for our students with behavioral issues who don't read social cues as well. And the more information that they can get, the better off they'll be. Beyond that, we have committed to our staff and will continue to commit any protective PPE requested by our staff. We will provide gloves. We will provide Tyvek suits. We will provide shoe booties. We will provide the equipment that ensure that our staff are safe, which means that students are safe. The way for us to achieve student safety is to ensure staff safety so that we have the staff to serve them and to protect them. We also have a process for any staff who are immunocompromised and any students who are immunocompromised. We will be creating individual accommodations for those families. We understand that people can be in very unique situations. Please trust and believe that we are doing everything that we can to ensure that people with very specific needs, that we're working to meet those with the resources that we have. I will give you an example. We had one of our employees who came to us who previously was in a front office and interacted with the public and had a medical issue in the spring, and they came to us with a note from their doctor that said this individual is at risk. And we sat down and met with them and said, what between you and your doctor would you need as an accommodation for you to be able to safely do your job? And we were able to develop and put in place some clear plexiglass barriers that met this individual and their doctor's requirements. So again, we are doing everything that we can to keep our staff safe, to keep our students safe, and that keeps our families safe within here. Having said that, we also continue, and I cannot say this enough, any family may choose virtual education. They may choose full off-site virtual education, which again is not what you experienced in the spring, right? So we want to be clear that people have personal choices and that we are accommodating those choices to the extent that we can. Now, once we have everyone for all of the pieces of the plan from JCHD and the revisions from the West Virginia Department of Education, we have been told that we expect to get those pieces in time to revise this plan and get it back out this week. We are shooting for the 15th. Hopefully there are no more major announcements to change. The caveat that I will convey, and we can talk about this a bit more at the next meeting, is that we will have to come back to the school board with a revised calendar because the school board has to vote on that. The governor can mandate start and end dates, but only a local school board can approve the calendar. So that will have a bit more time. I can state for all of our staff, because there have been concerns based on the governor changing the calendar, there were concerns about there being a gap in pay because we had individuals starting their contract 3 weeks earlier. I can confirm after discussion with the State Department, the state superintendent, that there will be no gap in pay for our staff. Their pay period will continue unabated while we make shifts to the calendar. Again, there are changes. We hear those, we talk through them, we work through them in as civil and open a manner as possible, and we take suggestions, and we really very much appreciate the community's patience and support while we're trying to work through this. So if any individuals have questions, concerns, please send them to the facilitator in the chat, and Mr. Fogel will respond to those either verbally, ask someone on our staff to respond to those, or if you'll look in the chat, I see that he's already working on answering some of those questions for everyone. So Mr. Fogel, I will turn it over to you for the Q&A. And then after the Q&A, I suspect that there will be comments from our board members regarding the questions that are coming in from the public.
All right, we've got a few questions coming in so far. A question here now about needing to utilize sick leave if one of our employees were part of a core group that was quarantined due to a positive test.
Thank you. That is an excellent question. Essentially, there is federal legislation called the Covert Cares Act. Individuals who are placed on quarantine based on a positive COVID result will not be required to utilize their personal leave during that time. All of our staff, professional and service, we developed a spreadsheet of duties during virtual. For teachers, those will include continuing to teach during quarantine with the group that they are quarantined with. And they will be teaching virtually for every one of our positions, for custodians, for bus drivers, for aides. We have a set of duties for them. We have revised that set of duties. We actually have groups in those areas and through our 3 active unions reviewing those and giving us feedback. So you will not be utilizing your personal leave. It's not your fault if you're sick and you have to be quarantined.
Similar to that, will there be any accommodations for attendance for students? And are we going to, what would be required for a student to return to the classroom after a positive test?
So I will defer on a couple of things. Number one, as I stated, the Jefferson County Health Department is the one who conducts the contact tracing protocol. They are the ones who medically can release someone to return to work. They are the ones who are charged by the governor and the state DHHR with managing contact tracing for any outbreak. So I don't want to misspeak or to convey anything that's not exactly in keeping with the guidance that they've provided. So I would defer that until we receive the JCHD contact tracing protocol, which will be in our full plan.
Any updates on the staff start date at this time?
That is a great question. The start date for staff recommendation will be included in the recommendation to the board for the calendar. As you may be aware, we received draft guidance from the Board of Education on Friday, and it is Monday. And we've actually already met with AFT, WVSSPA, and WVEA, and met with our leadership team, and already contacted both Berkeley and Morgan about our ideas for calendar to ensure that they aren't doing something drastically different that would make it difficult for our families, our teachers for childcare, because we share, particularly with Berkeley, we share a lot of families. So we're doing our best to make sure those are close, at least on major holidays. Our hope, my hope, is that we will be presenting to the board a calendar that contains at least 2 full weeks of preparation time for our staff to be on campus before students are introduced. We are asking them to do very, very hard things. We are practically reinventing every process that they have. And particularly for these teachers, moving to block scheduling, for teachers who are moving to these great teachers who are down there in elementary, they will be putting a lot of little smiley faces, 6 feet apart in classrooms and in hallways, and putting up signage. And they need the time and the space to be able to do that.
We have some concerns being raised about the discipline surrounding masks and students who may not wear those.
And again, that is an excellent question. We're not here to punish children. We will take our cues on whether or not masks are mandatory from the governor's office. He has the authority to mandate mask requirements inside and out, as well as the size of public gatherings. We will not defy the governor's orders on that. I will say, from a philosophical point of view, it is not our primary mission or focus or desire to punish. Our desire is to teach. So we will be working, we have a lot of training for the teachers in the beginning on social emotional support for children as they return, and on guidance and supporting children through best practices and how to help them with their experience. We also I spoke with the state superintendent and the state deputy superintendent and the state attorney to ensure I had accurate guidance on whether or not reducing student entry during the first week and having a rolling entry was acceptable for counting those for school days. And what I mean is our calendar plan that we would submit to the board will have a phased entry plan. When I say phased entry, I see that Miss Angela Weaver is on here. So you're an elementary teacher, and let's say you have 20 kids, you have a very large classroom. So let's say you have 20 kids. I just use 20 because the math is easier for me. Let me admit that. And day one of school on Tuesday, 25% of your kids come in. They come through the full day with you. You walk them through all of the processes. You see how that movement works, whether or not any signage is confusing. They go home. The next day, another 25% of your class comes through and they walk through the process and you work with them. We need very small groups in the beginning so that teachers can calm students' fears, so that people who are in new situations can accustom themselves to new processes, so that teachers and service personnel have a lot of opportunities to practice, so that they learn this works, this doesn't, this is confusing for my kids. Oh, this is the part that students balk at or that worry them, or let me see how I can change this for this to work better. That at a minimum for the first week. And again, as this gets closer, things may change. There is every opportunity for the governor, the West Virginia Department of Education, to issue an order for us to start on full virtual, which we are prepared to do, or we go to school for a week and then go to full virtual, or some edict comes out in the interim. We are planning as well as we can based on what we know now.
Speaking of virtual, question about how families will be able to let us know what they want and when that might be possible, if they want to choose virtual versus in person.
That is a fantastic question. And as we've said before, our idea was you can't make a choice when you don't have information about what you're choosing between. So what we have said is when we hand you our full plan, here's what we're doing as of today. Here's the classes, here's the schedule, here's our safety protocol, here's our contact tracing, here's our deep cleaning, here's the child care committee feedback on providing child care for parents. Once you have all of that information, then you can make an informed decision about virtual. The fact that we plan on releasing the full plan this week based on the commitment from other agencies to get their information to us, we believe Within a week after releasing that plan, we will release a questionnaire to parents that says, now that you have our plan, and we'll have a full link to the plan in there. Again, we're going to send it out everyone's school messenger, app, Facebook. We'll have paper copies for people to pick up. It will be ubiquitous. Now that you see our plan, now what's your decision? People will have both the virtual brochure so they'll understand what that means and what those commitments are. Again, virtual in the fall, if you choose virtual, will look very different. You will be in class every day, face to face with a teacher on a schedule, and you will turn in your assignments and they will be graded, and you will get feedback, and you will be tested, and you will be held accountable, and you will be using West Virginia approved curriculum. So be very clear about what you're choosing. You will also have our full reentry plan, and you will know every aspect of our schedule, of our cleaning, of our safety protocol, of our requirements, and you'll be able to make an informed choice.
Sort of piggybacks on that. Will classroom teachers be facilitating the virtual classroom option if their students choose to go that route?
Again, some of that depends on circumstances that are outlined in our reentry plan.
Are specials teachers losing their classrooms to make more space for social distancing?
That's a good question. I wouldn't phrase it that way, but what will be happening is we've been given guidance that our students are not to be traveling through multiple classrooms. So right now, the model that we're looking at is that specials teachers will follow a safety protocol that we have specifically for them, go into a classroom pod, work with those students, come back out, follow our safety disinfection, and then go to another classroom. The issue with movement of students, and part of why this plan is as detailed as it is, the idea is that we keep very tight control over small groups that we do not expose to any greater extent than we absolutely must. And a lot of movement is a lot of exposure. So keeping students in small pods with the same teacher with tightly controlled access is our greatest hope of being successful in managing this pandemic.
Are there any plans in place for families who may want to do virtual school but don't have access to reliable internet?
Yes. And it's a variety. Again, so Mr. Fogel, you can help me out here.
Yes, ma'am. So right now, currently we have 2 hotspots set up outside of our high schools. That's what we utilized in the spring when we had to do some crisis teaching and realize that this was an issue based on surveys out to our families. Essentially, it is a period where we will expand our secure network into the parking lot. People can come and log in that way, whether you're interacting directly or downloading materials, following up on emails. You'll have that opportunity. We're looking at other partners out in the community who can expand that, and possibly even some mobile Wi-Fi options. Our tech director, Jennifer Rowan, has done an outstanding job at finding some of those resources, and many of them at a huge savings, which is always a little bonus I like to throw in there. But yes, we are very aware that there is a technology gap in some places, and we are working hard to try and fill that gap to the greatest extent possible.
I will also convey that we've been working with the West Virginia Department of Education on a deal with Sprint that we are hopeful will come to fruition, which would allow a full service unlimited data plan in full for the entire school year for any family that is within their coverage area, provided we can purchase the appropriate hotspots for them. That is a technical problem that we are working through, but again, we are actively pursuing every possible means for getting Wi-Fi access inside the home to families. And for those that we cannot find a way to physically get it into their home, we have set up hotspots around the county for them to be able to utilize.
We have a question about opportunities for families to be trained on how to use the virtual learning options.
And again, I know that Ms. Rowan is on this call. I believe Ms. Tanya Dallas Lewis may be as well. And they created several training videos for teachers that we used during the spring, and we've updated those. If you go on our website now, you can find training videos both in English and in Spanish that explain to parents how to utilize Google Classroom, that explain to parents how to utilize Zoom. So we have some training, and then as we're rolling out virtual, we will have additional training. The idea is that we've been furiously training our staff on virtual. They are so much more prepared now to run full virtual than they were in March when it was a surprise. And we will do the same for our parents. We've done some, and it's been appreciated. But with full virtual, we have a great deal more to do, and we have a lot of resources. Parents who are going to choose virtual, we will have training sessions for them, as well as videos that they can be reviewing in advance to educate themselves about the tools.
Will they be able to change their mind midstream?
So the guidance from the West Virginia Department of Education as of last Monday was that students on virtual could only change at the semester break.
There was talk, the thought exchange talked about change in schedule. Is that still happening, and what does that look like?
Again, that is a very broad question in terms of schedule. The reentry document will address that. As we noted previously in Thought Exchange, in order to get the mandatory, still mandatory, deep cleaning that's required by the West Virginia Department of Education and DHHR, and the planning for our teachers who we are asking to do some incredibly difficult work, we have to either not go 5 days a week or we have to go shortened days. And whether those days are shortened by a late arrival or an early dismissal, those are some of the questions that we've put out in the Thought Exchange. And as we pull that data and get the feedback, we will be making that recommendation to the board based on that feedback.
Do we have any information regarding how substitute teachers will work, or is that going to be spelled out on the plan as well?
That will be spelled out in the plan, and I will state that the feedback on that has changed within the last 2 weeks. There has been some changes regarding substitutes. The predominant focus seems to be on limiting the number of places that they have access to. And we'll have the latest guidance when the plan comes out. We'll have that in there with the caveat that if the guidance changes, we'll have to update that.
Will classrooms with flexible seating be changed as part of this process for social distancing, et cetera?
You're breaking my heart, Hans. So I know. So for the last, and I can't, for the last several years, our teachers have been doing some amazing work. Our instructional coaches, in terms of best practice for kids, flexible classroom seating, collaboration, small group work, hands-on, STEM activities. We've seen some amazing increases in our scores. We've seen increases in dual enrollment. We've seen we've seen ourselves rise to the highest SAT English scores in the state. We've seen our mathematics scores come up. We're in the top free. You're doing some amazing things. And right now, some of those things we have to pause on doing. I would not remove all of the flexible seating within a classroom. If you will recall, those pods are students who have their access is limited to one another, and you can still utilize flexible seating with social distancing. For instance, many of you have little cozy reading areas for kids where you have bean bags and you have books on the floor and you have, you know, these nice little themed, I've seen pretend campfires and camp chairs. You can put those camp chairs 6 feet apart. It will limit your flexible seating simply because you need more space for it, but you'll have fewer students. So it will be a trade-off.
Will there be more information about special education students and how these changes might impact them in the plan?
Absolutely. For all of our students with special needs, their parents and their teachers know that child the best. That's why the system is set up off of individualized education programs. So just as we did during the pandemic, we will be having individualized IEP meetings for those students. Some of them, it will mean modifications to their PPE. So for instance, if we had a child with a type of physical or behavioral disability where wearing a mask is not feasible, cannot happen. For those students, we have clear plexiglass desk stands to be able to limit their exposure around them. We will likely implement some schedule changes based on what the child's strengths and weaknesses are and limiting their exposure for travel. I will not convey that any of it will be the absolute ideal that they were experiencing previously, but it has changed for everyone. They will be given full access to our instructional program. Our instructional program just doesn't look like what it did before. So we have to go back student by student and say, based on what it looks like now, what's the best way for your child to access this?
And there's a few questions in here about a blended learning option and if there is anything like that at this point being considered.
Absolutely. We've had blended learning at high school for several years, and Mr. Dilly and his team have done a masterful and an extraordinary job. I cannot say enough about our team, the teachers, the business owners, the folks in the community, the health department, emergency services, the folks who have worked on this plan, our service personnel. We do have blended learning options, meaning that we have students, which is another one of the ways to reduce class sizes, who will be taking courses on site and courses virtually. That will also continue to include dual enrollment. We've worked with WVU, Shepherd, and Blue Ridge. All three have committed to continuing our dual enrollment program and to supporting those students through virtual. So they will continue to have the dual enrollment options that they had before.
And will that be at the middle school level at this point, the blended option, or is that high school only? We had a couple of questions about clarification on that.
At this point, that is high school only. Again, we will continue to, if we find that there is a significant level of need between virtual and on-site, and I will continue to convey the purpose of this plan is to limit exposure. If you have students who are moving in and out of options randomly, number one, it creates a safety issue because it creates an exposure issue. We have someone coming back in who's been outside of our sphere of influence for quite some time and hasn't been through our protocols. It is an enormous amount of time and energy for our staff. When you haven't been there to go through the safety protocols and to understand what's happening, they have to stop and back up and work with you through that, and moving back and forth, both in Weavis, in registration, in teacher time and effort, is an enormous churn. So having mixed options where students are moving back and forth, those can be very problematic. And the further we extend those, we significantly complicate things for our staff and for our students in terms of both safety, administration, and instruction. So as of right now, blended is an option at high school. At elementary and middle, it is you are traditional on-site or you are virtual. And if Mr. Dilly has anything to add to that, I welcome it.
No, the only consideration that we're looking at right now would, even if we would consider a blended option for middle school, they would still be located at the school location. And that is basically, it would include one of our teachers as a facilitator as a way to help reduce class sizes in a specific classroom. But that's the only thing at the middle school at this time. We're exploring, but we have not committed to that option at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Dilly. And again, cannot say enough about the sheer volume of work that has gone into working through every option for redoing every single educational and safety and transportation and feeding process that we have. So.
Again, the plan, we're shooting for midweek to have that out, and then continual updates of the FAQ. I'll have a form up on our website as well for people to come and submit feedback. There will be an ongoing conversation about this as we go, because there are a lot of questions, I think, at all levels right now. So any closing thoughts on that, Dr. Gibson? We're still got a few rolling in, but as I say, we will save this feed, continue sending me the questions throughout the meeting, and I'll make sure that we do our level best to answer them in a timely manner.
Thank you very much for facilitating, Mr. Fogel. I greatly appreciate it. I will turn it back over to Ms. Skinner.
Thank you, Dr. Gibson. And just thank you to the entire staff. I know you guys are pretty much drowning right now, and they keep throwing not, lakes at you or ponds, but oceans, it seems. It's pretty incredible what's going on right now, but I have all the confidence in the world that you guys will keep reinventing the car that can be a boat that is going to be asked to fly next week. So just keep on doing what you're doing, and we'll come up with plan number 673, and maybe that'll be the one that works, hopefully sometime between now and September 8th. And I also want to appreciate everybody else for attending this evening. 168 participants, that's the most that we've had at a school board meeting in a very long time. So hopefully you got the information that you were looking for. And I know it's not all of the answers, but we'll keep working to get the right answer. So thank you for being here. All right, and now we're moving on to number 3, which is superintendent's comments. Dr. Gibson, did you have anything else to share with us?
You would think that I would have no further comments, but I do want to alert the board to 2 things. Number 1, as I stated, we have been furiously meeting with different groups today regarding suggestions, calendar changes. We hope to have proposed calendar changes within the next, I hope, next couple of days, and get those out for feedback from folks, because as you know, shifting school to start 3 weeks later, but only end 2 days later is pretty significant. So between September 8th and June 1st, getting in 180 days worth of instruction is going to entail both us pulling back on some holidays and some time off that were previously in our calendar, and or a combination of utilizing virtual and remote learning for students to be off of campus and count those as instructional days. So we're going to submit a calendar that has a combination of those things. Once we've gotten a draft, we've put it out for people to give us public comment and feedback. We have not been given the deadline date by the West Virginia Department of Education to turn in the revised calendar. It may well, we've been told that they want us to turn it around pretty quickly. So we may be requesting a special meeting prior to the July 23rd meeting. That will depend on the guidance that we get about when that calendar is due. So that's number one. Number two, as the good news continues to roll in, is that the governor released a statement changing the guidelines on outside gatherings and limiting those gatherings to no more than 25 individuals. I and every other superintendent within a 100-mile radius immediately contacted the West Virginia Department of Education to inquire as to whether or not this superseded the previous guidance from 3 weeks ago that the governor released on graduation. We were told that indeed it does. So we will be postponing that graduation until the governor makes a change to his order on outside gatherings. Again, our staff is exhausted, having worked on stage construction and planning and drones and remote broadcast and marking seating. However, at this point, we have to consider the safety guidance that we've been given. We have to adhere to the governor's orders, and we have to be mindful of the fact that as conditions change, our response has to change. And there has been, as you've seen in the media, as it's been conveyed to us from JCHD, there has been a significant uptick in the number of COVID cases. As of, I think it was 2 o'clock this afternoon was the last update that I had of the 8 counties that are in this superintendent's region. 3 of them have already canceled their live in-person graduations as well. We are simply postponing ours until we can get some additional guidance or updates on changes to those outside gatherings.
All right, so this train just keeps on coming. Thank you. Moving on to the approval of minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from our regular board meeting held June 22nd and the special board meeting held July 6th, the organizational meeting?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Ogden. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Cable. Any discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right, citizens' comments. I don't believe we had anybody sign up for citizens' comments this evening. Is that correct, Ms. Harner? Thank you. All right, consent agenda. Are there any changes to the consent agenda, Dr. Gibson?
Not changes, ma'am, but an announcement, again, a happy announcement. As always, we are very happy to get innovative instructors and administrators into Jefferson County schools, and kudos to our HR staff for their recruitment and retention efforts. So this evening, I am very, very happy to recommend for the assistant principal at C.W. Shipley, Mr. Brooks Kersey, who is joining us here. He has a bachelor degree in history from Bethany. He has a master's in education leadership from Willing Jesuit, and bless his heart, he is working on his doctorate currently at Liberty University. Good luck, dear. Always a head banging against the wall enterprise. But in addition to being a West Virginia history teacher, so local roots and local roots here in Jefferson, most people will recognize the Kersey name and the strong educational ties, and several years of experience as an assistant principal already. We are very excited to have him on board, and Mr. Kersey, if you'd like to unmute yourself and introduce yourself, and welcome to beautiful, blessed Jefferson County. We're glad to have you here, dear.
Thank you, Dr. Gibson. I appreciate it. Again, I'm Brooks Kersey, and I just want to say I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity to join Jefferson County Schools. As Dr. Gibson alluded to, I have, over the years developed several ties to the county. I have several family members from the area, and those that have been really influential toward my decision to go into education have Jefferson County ties. So I'm just extremely excited for the opportunity. There's a lot of great things going on within the county. So I'm very eager to get started, and I'd like to thank all those that were involved in the hiring process. And again, I can't say how grateful I am for the opportunity and can't wait to get started.
Well, thank you very much and welcome, Mr. Kersey. And I will just note that there was a deletion on number 3. Is that correct, Dr. Gibson? Okay. All right. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Cable. Is there a second?
Second, Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Any question or discussion? All right. Hearing none, all in favor of approving the consent agenda?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right. Unfinished business. The review the 2020-2021 board meeting dates for changes.
Yes, ma'am. At our organizational meeting, Mr. Osborne asked that the staff review the school board meeting calendar for the 2020-2021 school year and return with any potential conflicts so that the board could go ahead at this stage and make any edits or changes, knowing that at any point the board can call a special meeting with appropriate notice. At this point, amazingly enough, first of all, thank you very much to the lovely and talented Janet Harner, the real intellectual and memorial power here in the central office. She went through those, and there are only 2, I would say, conflicts. One of those is the Monday, November the 23rd. Under our current calendar, we are closed for the week of Thanksgiving. I will convey to the board, it is beyond highly unlikely that we could close for the entire week of Thanksgiving and still meet 180 instructional days. Our recommendation from a calendar committee, one of the very first recommendations will likely be that we attend the Monday and Tuesday of that week and give Wednesday, Thursday, Friday for Thanksgiving. So that Monday is unlikely to be a conflict under the new calendar, but you haven't adopted one yet. So you may defer that decision or you may make it now. The other conflict is that you would have a meeting on December the 28th. Again, under our current calendar, that is part of the winter holiday. Under the proposed calendar, you may make a different choice about instructional days between Christmas and New Year's.
Okay. Well, Mr. Osborne, did you have any thoughts on those? I mean, I don't mind just leaving them on there as our meetings and then deferring them when we get closer to it, having a better idea of what we're doing calendar-wise. But you're muted, Mr. Osborne.
I agree. I think we need to wait till after we get a calendar set.
Okay. And it was amazing that there were only 2, so thank you, Ms. Harner. All right, so moving on. New business, request for approval for an RFP for bids for IT storage array maintenance.
Good evening. We come to you in the operations department with a request this evening for storage area network arrays. And these would be located at Harpers Ferry Middle School and Washington High School. Jen Rowan, our amazing technology director, is here with us. And because this is something that is new, I'd like her to give a brief explanation as to what it is and why it's needed. It's not something, it's new to RFP for you. It's not new to our budget. And it is budgeted for in the technology budget. So without further ado, I'll let Jen explain a little bit about our storage area network arrays. Jen?
Thank you so much, Joyce. And I'm sorry about being in the basement, but it is bedtime and we're in a pandemic, so I am in the basement. So I just wanted to let you know too that Adam Kirchville is also on this call. He is our system support specialist, and he allows us to, entrance to all of our computers and keeps things running when it goes down. So he's here to actually answer a lot of those technical questions as well. So as I'm a generalist, he's a specialist in those type of things. So really what a storage array, it's about supervising those storage arrays. Storage arrays act like storage units for our electronic files. And it allows the students to get on their devices that are connected to the network and also the internet. So we can't lose data. That would be a really bad situation to lose student data. So we want to make sure we ensure that they're supervised, and we don't want them to go down. And if they do go down, we need like an insurance plan as to how they come back up. In general, they go down around 4 times maybe per year. Each time could be around $20,000 for emergency maintenance if we do not have something already in place. By supervising these storage arrays through this type of RFP, we're looking at probably spending around $30,000 to $50,000 for the entire year. And so that will be a savings, and we did have it in the past year, but we've decided to bid this out just because of our situation right now, to see if we can get any more cost savings. And again, this is my first cycle in, so I wanted to ensure that we got the best price. We do have cyber in addition to this, so this is a little bit different. We do have cybersecurity insurance, but that's a little bit different. Cybersecurity insurance is for if we get hacked or if there's ransomware, which we need as well. But we already have that. But I wanted you to know the difference too. So Adam, do you have anything that you would like to add to speak to the board about? What kind of benefits this would provide?
Yeah, so these storage arrays, the reason why we're getting this additional IT maintenance plan is that whenever we bought the storage arrays, they came with a certain limited time warranty where if something were to go bad, Dell EMC themselves would send us a new drive or a new piece of hardware, and they'd install it for us, worst case scenario. But these systems are out of the point of their end of life and end of support according to Dell. So we wanted to get a third-party support company to ensure that, if something goes down, if a hard drive fails, that we have somebody to rely on and for them to send us a new drive in a pretty timely fashion.
Thank you so much, Adam. Does anyone have any questions for us that we may address?
And if we don't have any questions, we'll ask the board to have action as to whether we can go out for the RFP for the SAN network.
I have 2 quick questions. The locations are at Washington and Harpers Ferry, but does that cover the entire county then? I mean, it's not just for those schools, correct?
Yes, those are our information centers for the rest of the county. We have one at the board office, which we actually had to emergency replace, and we're still waiting for a part that covers the board office, but the rest cover all the schools, yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
Move to Agree.
A second to go out for the RFP.
Okay, so Mr. Cable made a motion to go out for the RFP and Ms. Ogden seconded it. Any other questions or concerns? All right. All in favor of approving to go out for an RFP for bids for the IT storage array maintenance?
Aye. Aye.
Thank you.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, this evening is getting funner by the moment here, Dr. Gibson. Next up, we have the bond call review and possible action.
Actually, for all joking aside, we're enormously blessed, where I feel very lucky every single day to wake up and work in Jefferson County. We have a great staff. We have a supportive board. We have a supportive community. So there are difficult times, no doubt, but there's nobody else that I'd rather be going through them with. So that just needed to be said. So as far as the bond goes, for those of you who have some history, you recognize that we started this process in 2018. We were one of the first 2 counties in the state to work in the new CEFP system, get ours submitted and approved. We actually helped them work several of the kinks out of their system. Randy Jones at OWPR has been a constant supportive force. I feel like I need to send Christmas presents to his children. Really have gone through a lot together. What you see attached that is in board docs that we have presented is the suggestions for the bond based on, number 1, the CEFP. Number 2, we had public committees for all of those. For instance, we had a safety committee that was composed of the sheriff's department, local police departments, Homeland Security. We had someone from the FBI on there, and all of them contributed to the safety committee's recommendation. When it came to instruction, when it came to facilities, we had athletic facilities, we had public groups and committees work on all of those. They submitted their work. Then we had a series of live, back when we could do that, public hearings on all of those for any changes folks wanted to see. We came back and made edits. The board voted for us to move forward with a bond. There were a lot of other things going on at that time, and we felt like the board felt like we needed to commit more time and energy to helping the public understand the bond, and for us to be certain that SBA was on board with everything and that we had captured everything that we needed to during some rapidly changing circumstances. So we brought the bond back and had additional items during the public special session that we had. We had 100 people log on. We went over and reviewed everything that was in this bond call, asked for any edits, any changes, any feedback, made those edits, and are coming back to the board again. In order for this bond to be on the November ballot, we have got to submit the full legal itemized bond call to Nikki Painter in the election office no later than August 25th. And that was under pre-pandemic conditions. I would state at this point, we very much would be doing ourselves and her a favor if we could get it to her at the beginning of August, because the amount of prep time that these things take. It still needs to be written through the bond attorney and the bond finance person. So tonight, what we're asking is that the board review and approve the contents of the bond, meaning we have that bond and it's posted up at board docs for folks to see. And actually, Hans, if you want to run the hosting back over to me, I can open up and post on everyone's screen the actual bond call. So the board will need to make that decision. And then the board will also need to make the decision regarding finance. Depending on what you include, you have the option of how many years you finance this at. Interest rates, of course, are set by the public and the people who purchase the bonds, but whether or not you finance something for 15 years or for 25 years is a decision of the board. And we have also provided the board with a number of different scenarios for their review that would convey the interest rate and the cost to citizens dependent upon the options chosen. So thank you very much, Mr. Fogel, for having given me back the share screen. And I will post up the bond if you will give me just one moment. I have a lot of documents open right now. Okay, share. Okay, so what you see before you is the last bond call with all of the varying initiatives within that. Starting at the top, these are all of the previous vetted, reviewed, feedback portions of this. The things from the last public meeting that were changed per the discussion of the board were converting all of our water fountains to bottle fill because of the changes to our safety protocol. The STEAM lab expansions for supporting blended and virtual learning in those schools, and finally removing all of the carpets in classrooms for hypoallergenic cleanliness. We've been doing a couple of classrooms a year. This amount would finish that project off for the entire school system. All of the rest of these are the projects that have been on the books and under review for the last 2 years. And I know that Mr. Randy Jones is on this call, as is our bond attorney, Mr. Roger Hunter, as is the bond financer, Joe Nassif, and also Brandon Caton, who is our facilities director, and Joyce White, who is our deputy superintendent for operations. So at this point, we've given you all of the information that we have. I will also convey for anyone who is newly to this process and might have a question about the things in red at the bottom. So the total bond call for all of the items that have been reviewed and discussed is $39,994,887. Two things that the board has to make a decision on about whether or not to include. Number one, there was an early option for an auxiliary gym at Washington High School. Jefferson High has a full gym and an auxiliary gym. Washington High School, when it was built, I believe the board at the time, in an effort to save money, only built a primary gym and not an auxiliary. That would come at a cost of $1.8 million. The reimbursement of the maintenance fund. In terms of safety, there have been several projects, athletic facilities projects, that the board has funded out of our local funds that we typically utilize for maintenance, for HVAC, for purchasing and fixing sidewalks and windows, and a whole host of things, for grooming athletic fields, for doing things. Those total expenditures over the last year have been $1.7 million. Now, we've utilized funds from the sale of the bus garage to help cover that, from our carryover to help cover that. Those have been the Jefferson High School track at $412,000, the Washington High School track at $284,000, and the Washington High School turf field at $787,414. And as the board approved last week, the Wildwood Middle School game field at $254,000. So adding this into the bond would allow us to recoup those expenditures back into our operating budget to deal with any maintenance, building, field issues that we would have previously, and to quote unquote, as Mr. Osborne has said frequently before, replenish our coffers, because we don't have a dedicated savings account for field replacement. We started last year when Mr. Osborne suggested it, putting $100,000 a year aside so that in 10 years, when we had to replace a turf field, we'd have the money. We just utilized that to pay for the Wildwood Middle School game field. So that is now gone once again. So I certainly, it is a decision of the board what you include and do not. I believe that to the extent that you can replenish operating funds, that should be a priority, but again, entirely a decision of the board. And if the board has any questions about specific items or about financing, please ask away. And I'm happy to post anything up onto the screen at the request of board members.
Dr. Gibson, is this the 39.9? Might as well say 40 million. Does that include the red numbers, or are the red numbers added to the 40?
Those red numbers, that's a great question, sir. Those red numbers would be added to the 40. The 39,994,887 does not include either the 1.8 for the auxiliary gym, nor does it include reimbursement for the 1.7.
Which would be 43,532,971.
It is always pleasant to have a CPA as a board chair, ma'am. Thank you.
Can I ask a couple questions now?
Yes, Ms. Joy, go ahead.
Okay. When do you expect the 2 elementary schools to be completed? Any idea? Jefferson Elementary and Ranson, correct?
Yes, ma'am. Currently in our CEFP, we have both Ranson Elementary and Shepherdstown Elementary as builds for those. The date of the build and final completion will be dependent upon 2 things. Number one, of course, the passage of the bond, SBA approval for any matching funding, and the approval of this board. That said, once all of those things are in place, it is typically at a minimum a 2-year and usually more like a 3-year process. I can let Randy Jones speak to that. Between the planning for the building, the public input about what things go into the building specifically, and then the actual groundwork and the building and getting it open, I would certainly say 2 to 3 years. But Randy, if you'd like to speak to that.
That's okay. I have another point. So the reason I asked that is because I'm trying to understand why you're asking to spend $383,000 at Ranson Elementary to add a security waiting room and replace the HVAC. But at Shepherdstown Elementary, you're not going to fix the roof because you're replacing the school because it's unnecessary. So what's the reasoning behind that?
That's a very good question. So for the 2 things, number one, of the 2, the board has previously stated, now that is certainly a decision this board can make, that Shepherdstown Elementary will probably be replaced prior to Ranson Elementary, because right now that is the school that is the most overcrowded. So that's one thing. The other thing is structurally the roof at Shepherdstown Elementary, we've lived with that roof and it does have some leaks in it, and we can patch those things. The problem with the HVAC at Ranson is when that fails, that is a safety issue for our students in terms of their air quality and them being able to function there. We could certainly put off adding the additional security lane, but the board has also spoken about, and again, they may change their minds, that at this time, they have not made a decision about any future function of that Shepherdstown Elementary School. The board has discussed either the sale of it or perhaps there might be a university somewhere nearby interested, who knows, or a business. But for Ranson Elementary, the discussion has been focused consistently on turning that facility into a very centralized preschool center. One of the great things about Ranson is it's in a walkable community, and we very much enjoy that. And number two, it's sized very, very advantageously for a preschool center. And it also, in terms of transportation and cost of transportation, it's central to the county, and it would allow us to add some features in for preschool education that right now, because we have all of our preschool so spread out among both schools and private, that we don't have those features at every single place. So again, based on previous guidance from the board, we've been given the direction that it is more likely that Ranson will continue to function as an educational center even after we build the new one, and then pull preschool back out of all of our other elementary schools and make more space at those places where that is highly unlikely for Shepherdstown Elementary.
Okay, so it sounds like you don't really need a new building at Ranson Elementary. It's more of, you're saying you want more space and you're going to use this for preschool. That's what it sounds like. So the building, so do you have so many extra students that you need a new building? Is that the reason? And it's a concern that, do you have enough students to warrant the building authority to, is that how it works? They'll match funds if you have to meet a minimum number of students, correct? Is that correct? I'm not sure about that.
Well, the school building authority has a number of different criteria that they use. They actually have a rubric, and they have that rubric up on their website. And when we were doing our CEFP, we had a link through to it on our website as well, but I can provide that to you. So they have a number of criteria that they use when they decide which projects to fund. And we meet with them as a board and a superintendent every single year and update them on our plans. So as far as having a need for capacity and student space, absolutely. When it comes to preschool, we currently have a significant portion of our preschool students off-site. We are placing them in private facilities, and the funding for those students is going to private facilities because we do not have the space to house them in our buildings. And certainly it's been a desire of our instructional staff and our board and our parents for a while to have a center in which we could not only house all of those students, we could also, as I stated, have some additional support for them because it would be centralized.
Yeah, I understand that when the numbers went down at Ranson, the kindergarten, they lost a kindergarten because they were so few numbers. So they actually do have a room for a preschool. So at least one room that's free. So how many more preschoolers are you envisioning? Because I'm trying to understand this number situation.
Yes, ma'am. So I spoke to Ms. Corbett, and thank you very much for speaking with our principals and doing your research. Yes, part of what happened is Ranson Elementary is a very popular destination for students to transfer into. And 2 years ago, Ranson Elementary was so full that we stopped transfers into the school and moved a preschool out of it to create enough space. When we stopped transfers into the school, yes, their numbers went down. Also, that coincided with the legislation that changed the age for kindergarten entrance. So It used to be that you could turn 5 by October the 1st in order to enter into kindergarten. They bumped that date back by 2 months. And so our kindergarten enrollment went down as a result of that. Now, in some places, our preschool numbers went up because people who would have gone to kindergarten just enrolled their children in preschool. In other places, it didn't. People simply kept their kids home for another year until kindergarten started. So we could certainly in other times place a preschool class back into Ranson Elementary. We are highly unlikely to be doing that this year because of our need for space and for social distancing.
Right. So
Madam President?
next year you might be able to put that preschool back. It sounds like if you have the room. I have a few more questions, Mr. Cable, if that's okay. So the Page Jackson Historical Center, is that just one room in the board office that you're saying the 817,000? Is that to remodel a room? Can you explain that?
Yes, ma'am, I can. If you look at the document that we provided, you'll notice that where it says central office and Page Jackson Historical Center, there are several items within that. One is a partial roof replacement. We had some significant damage to the roof, and we've had leakage and damage to things inside the central office. That is where we house all of, as Ms. Rowan stated, the the server that keeps all of our staff and most of our student data. It's pretty important that we protect it. That is also quite an old building. Another part of that is that we do not have ADA compliant entryways to that building based on its age, and we don't have, once we're back in the building for school board meetings and they go late, one of the things that you will find is that we have no other than the light at the front door and a light shining on the flag because it's required. We have no external lighting at that building. We also do not have a secured locking waiting area coming in as we have it proposed at all of the schools. And we're proposing that we retrofit that Page Jackson room in conjunction with the Page Jackson Alumni Association. As most folks are aware, that is the iconic high school for African-American students during the age of segregation, and they flourished quite well in spite of those struggles. And we think it is important, never more so than in this day and age, that we turn that into a learning opportunity for folks and we honor that legacy. And we both get, our hope is to be able to get some oral history and to be able to outfit that room more as a museum. Several of those individuals are aging rapidly and we're losing that history, and we'd like to be able to capture that. And right now, a small portion of that money, the vast majority of it, is the roof. And roof, okay. And then secondary to that, the lighting.
I know it's used as a conference room a lot. I'm just wondering if it would make more sense to have the museum in a separate location so that the public could access it. It's only accessible, I guess, during the school day, and there's nobody really monitoring this. I'm just wondering, just from my observation, it just looks like it's being used as a conference room most of the time. And what does retrofit mean? What do you mean by retrofit?
When we talk about retrofitting, yes, ma'am, part of that retrofitting is to make a decision about utilizing it as a museum space rather than a meeting space. We do currently, our front desk is during normal times manned every minute that we're open from 7 a.m. until 5 p.m. during the summer, and 8 a.m. until 4 p.m. during the school year. And we do have individuals who come in, frequently they're alumni, and utilize that space. And we have community members come in and utilize that space for Sometimes they do training, sometimes alumni come in, and once or twice a year we have someone come in who graduated from there and simply want to go through the museum and share some memories with us. So when you talk about possibly having it at another site and another location, that is not something that the Page Jackson alumni who we've spoken with in developing this proposal have expressed an interest in. This was their high school. This is where the history occurred, and it's important to them to maintain that history.
So maybe you need a conference room then. That's my point, because it seems that it's mostly used as a conference room. Just my last question is about the stationary bikes. So $150,000 for stationary bikes. And I'm just wondering, you know, where this came from. Is there research that this improves students' reading? You know, are there other school systems using this program? It just stood out to me, and I called all the middle schools and nobody responded. Nobody was there, nobody answered. I left messages. I just trying to get more information.
No wonder.
Excuse me?
I'm sorry. So for the middle schools, this is a program that the National School Library Association awarded as recognized as a model program for middle school students. The way that it works is that to encourage reading among middle school students, they place stationary bikes, and in some school systems, they've been able to get them donated, and certainly that would be our first choice, with reading stands. And then they worked with their coaches and their PE teachers, and students were given credit for the amount of time that they were on their bikes towards their sports programs and towards reading time. And one of the things that they found in the research that they provided was that reading time among middle school males increased pretty significantly when they gave them time on the bike. Now that was tied to their coaches being willing to give them credit for being on the bike and reading while they were on the bike. And when we spoke with our coaches, they were willing to do that. So again, it is nothing more than a program that the National School Library Association recognized as a program with merit and research behind it to support increasing middle school male readership.
But not reading comprehension, just reading, correct?
Just reading,
I mean,
yes,
for
ma'am.
me, I just can't really comprehend. I can read till the cows come home, but to be able to bike and read at the same time, but to comprehend, I just, so it doesn't sound like this came from the middle school PE program. This was just an idea somebody had that sounded interesting, correct?
It did not come from the middle school PE coaches. We did ask the middle school coaches and ADs whether or not they were supportive of the idea and were they willing to work with us to create a system to reward the students who participated, and they said yes.
It's my understanding from the one piece of research I read, pedaling produced electricity to keep these tablets running. And that's what caused them to read. And the argument against it was that it kept students, you know, tied to electronics. I'm not saying that I am against it. I love, I love sports, but I'm just trying to understand the meaning and purpose and value. When, I mean, I know that there's issues with, heating and air conditioning at Jefferson Elementary. And I know we're building a school, but that's 2 years from now. So just want to make sure that we're using money wisely and that it's on things that have been vetted. And if there's other schools locally or is it going to be for maybe students with ADHD? That was another thing that I found, that these students really loved using it. So maybe kids in the special ed program may benefit. It's just, I'm not clear the purpose. That's why I was asking. So I think those are all my questions.
Madam President,
Yes, sir.
I would like to move to approve the whole thing that we have here on the screen, red and black.
Okay. We can do that. I actually had a quick question for Mr. Jones, if you don't mind me asking that first.
Not at all.
Mr. Jones, I have 2 quick questions for you, if you don't mind. Just, are you there?
Yes, ma'am. Sorry, I'm late joining the meeting.
Oh, no, thanks for joining us. We appreciate that. I just had 2 quick questions. And the first one was just a couple things that dropped off the CEFP, did not make it to the bond call project list. And one was the JROTC classroom and storage. I know that had a pretty big price tag on it, but I know that they opted to stay in those trailers that are out there at Jefferson High School. Are those trailers going to have a life for the next 10 to 15 years, do you know?
No, I don't know exactly what's going to happen with those trailers, but I do recall the conversations with them about wanting to continue to utilize that space for storage. They didn't see the value in just constructing a new room just for storage, but there may also be some other opportunities to find storage space for them.
But they're using it as classroom and storage, correct?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, yes.
I mean, I just want to make sure that we don't leave a big piece out that, we can't put back after the fact. That, and then my second question is, we also dropped off a lot of interior finish upgrades throughout the schools. Could you just give a quick synopsis of what those may have been?
The overall condition of schools is in pretty good condition. A lot of the finishes are somewhat dated, but we had put on our initial observations that you may want to consider replacing those in the next 10 years. But just due to all the requirements and demands, the heating, air conditioning system, the roofs, those types of things, those finishes kind of came down on the priority list. Certainly, if there's some opportunities through SBA funding for some other projects, we may be able to go back and add some of those finishes in. But it's hard to do, just go in and replace all the finishes in schools because it's so disruptive. It has to be done over the summer. It may be a better approach to do some targeted finish replacement, such as, I know one of the things we talked about is getting carpet out of the schools entirely. So that might be a better way to proceed.
Okay. Dr. Gibson, do you have any input on those 2 questions?
No, ma'am. Again, I would, if we were to build the original plans for Jefferson High School, included an additional wing of hallways out where those JROTC trailers are now. And again, at the time, based on funding, they made the decision to shorten that and place the library where it is. So one of the initial discussions was, do we go back and place those classrooms back on the side of that? Part of the discussion at the time was when we redistricted from Jefferson High School over to Washington High School and balanced those out, we still have both of our high schools at, and don't quote me because I don't have it right in front of me, but I think it's 92+%. It's over 90% capacity. So eventually we are going to need another centralized high school, which is why we have that land in Ranson. And so to make a significant investment in adding another hall, when right now J High is bursting at the seams in terms of field space, athletics, and if you were to add another hallway to add several hundred more students, you'd be committing to a 2,000 student high school, which this board, and a future board may make a different decision, this board really wanted to keep our high school, middle, and elementary schools at what they felt were reasonable sizes. Elementary, the board at the time said no more than 600, middle schools no more than 900, and high schools, I think it was no more than 1,400, 1,500, and adding a whole nother wing would expand that capacity to put more and more kids into J High, which means a bigger cafeteria is needed, which means a bigger gym is needed, which means more athletic fields are needed. So at the time, the discussion was that would not be the most prudent use of school board funds because it would then force all of these other funding decisions.
And that makes total sense. I understand that. I just want to make sure that we're not dooming the ROTC program in the trailer space, because that's what it wasn't. The addition of the 12 extra classrooms, it was just the ROTC classroom and storage for $840,000. It wasn't the entire project.
Well, and again, if the board would like to add that back in or take anything back out, that is certainly the will of this board. So that ROTC center, I don't see ROTC going away from Jefferson High School. It will be many, many, many years before we build another high school, not because they're full, but because it's easier and cheaper to put trailers behind a high school up to a certain amount than it is to build a, $20 million high school. So it will be quite some time. And if the board wants to make that investment in a brick and mortar facility for JROTC, we can certainly add that back into the plan.
Do any other board members have any comments on what's on the current bond call or any additions or deletions?
I'd like a little clarification. Are we saying we will run the levy and the bond in this November election together?
Yes, sir. It is my understanding that that is the will of the board, that we run them together. The timing on the levy is certainly such that we will have to run it in November in order for us to both have an opportunity to either rerun it or to capture the tax collection prior to the levy running off, because once those tax rates are set, our levy, the current levy, only extends through June 30th, 2021.
I'm a bit concerned about running this bond in the economic climate that we have at this present time. That is one concern I have. And how many people in Jefferson County do we have that are not employed? And that concerns me quite a bit.
I share your concern, sir. We have quite a number of individuals who have suffered through this COVID crisis. And I do believe that while people are enormously supportive of schools here, and I think they're supportive of the levy, I do think it will be hard for them to look at those two things on a ballot and see the overall dollar amount and not have it cause them some angst. The levy is what they are already paying. They already have a comfort level and a knowledge of that. The bond would be something additional, and we could certainly educate people on the amount of addition that is. If you would like to have a discussion on funding and about what the cost would be to the average taxpayer, we can certainly have that discussion.
Really quickly, if we look at a bond that's about $42 million, paying it back over 15 years, The bond call amount that would have to go out is 5%, and that's pretty much worst case scenario because we can't predict what the bond rates would be when they actually went to sell the bonds. For a $250,000 house, it would be $127 a year. If we get the rate that the bond people are telling us is a pretty realistic rate at 2.2% for 15 years for the $42 million, for a $250,000 house, it would be $104 per year. And that's paying it back over the condensed 15 years.
So again, for less than $10 a month, which is something that we can translate very clearly for folks. Again, once we can explain it and get their attention.
Well, and how much, because we worked diligently to pay the current bond off early, do we know how much people's taxes dropped per year or will drop before this bond is on? So that, because we were trying to do it, I know, about the same time, so it would be a wash. One would come off and the other would go on. We wouldn't be raising people's taxes in any way, shape, or form. And that was the desire. Do we know when that transition will happen?
Tax bills just came out July 1st, so you can look on there and see.
Okay. My other question, or my only concern on this is the only request we had from Driftwood was the security glass transaction window. Was that the only request they had?
That was the only structural improvement on their CEFP. Yes, ma'am. They did not submit. And again, that is our newest elementary school. And if you know Kelly Osborne, her very favorite color is shiny. So that school is very, very well maintained. We did not receive any additional requests from them. But again, it is at the will and pleasure of this board what is included on this bond call.
Do we have any other glass transaction windows at any other school? I mean, I know I've been maybe 4 or 5 elementary schools. I have not seen one at this point. And the fact that we are not going to have people going in and out of those buildings quite the same this year anyway. I don't know what the future holds. I don't think any of us do.
We currently have a glass transaction window at Jefferson High School. And again, in the short term, and this was something that we wrestled with because we talked about some possible safety improvements, and the discussion really tried to center on, let's not be reactive. If this is a 15-year bond, then let's not put things in it that are responding to a 1-year crisis. So we tried to be mindful of those things and to include things that staff submitted and felt like were important. Having said that, we only have, to my knowledge, and Brandon, you're on here as well, or Joyce, the only school that I'm aware of that has one of those transaction windows is Jefferson High School.
Yes, ma'am, other than the new bus garage, they have a transaction window for child nutrition. Brandon, go ahead if you have input.
No, Jefferson High is the only school that has one.
I have another question, if this is a good time.
Yes, Ms. Troy, go ahead.
Getting back to these bikes, you just mentioned a 15-year plan. It just doesn't seem like these would warrant a 15-year plan to repay. Maybe the racetrack money would pay for something like that. I guess I just want more information about what the bikes are about and how many, and I know it's a minor. And then again, getting back to, it sounds like Ranson Elementary, you're not really desperate for a new school. It sounds like you're desperate for preschool. Maybe there's a way to add something temporary for that. I mean, because Mr. Osborne had mentioned this idea about the bond, people not being ready. If there's a way to reduce the cost, might be more attractive. I'm not sure. I don't know enough about it, but these are just my thoughts.
As far as the Ranson Elementary School goes, I mean, it's growth, it's, the number of children, but it's also the fact that the building itself, I mean, it doesn't have an adequate gym for a K-5 school. I mean, there are a lot of issues with the school. So turning that into a preschool center makes logical sense, and building a new school that has the current adequate facilities for those children would make a big difference. And the reason why, 15 years, I mean, I understand, a little project here and there, we could probably pay for, but the whole thing, $40 million, 15 years is pretty normal to go out for a bond, and it's covering 2 schools with all these little projects for all of the schools. Things like, playground equipment replacement, things like that. That's money that we don't get from anywhere. I mean, the SBA doesn't give money for playground equipment, and so we have to come up with those funds ourselves. Our operating budget is, fairly tight, so we don't really have the funds to go out and buy new playground equipment, but financing it for 15 years is pretty typical. So that's why I get as many projects into the bond as you can, because you're going to have to wait, 15 years unless you pay it off early, like we did with the last one, to go out for another bond in the future. So we do these projects for 15 years, hopefully pay the bond off in, 12 years or however early we can pay it off. And then you would go out for another bond at that point to build the new high school or whatever it is we need at that point. And Mr. Osborne, I understand your concern about, the financial environment these days right now. The issue is that if we don't put it on the November ballot, it would have to be in a special election, because the next ballot isn't for 2 more years, which means we wouldn't get any funding for 3 years. Because remember, there's that delay. If this goes on the November ballot and is successful in November, we're not going to get the funds in November. We have to wait for them to issue the bonds, and then they have to actually put it on the tax rolls for next July. So there's a delay there. It's not something that we can go out and spend on, Wednesday after the election.
But do we have enough students at Ranson Elementary? Will the funds be matched? Because, I understand that attendance or enrollment has decreased every year for the past 4 years in the county. I didn't look at specifically Ranson Elementary, but I'm just curious about that. I assume you've looked into those numbers. I may have asked this question already. But this is all dependent on the state matching the funds, correct? These numbers for the building fund.
Well,
right?
It has in there funds for both Branson and Shepherdstown to build a bare bones school. I mean, that would get us 4 walls and a roof. So we would definitely want the SBA to help match funds to be able to build the school we envision. Now, we have been working closely with the SBA over the past few years, and they're on track. They understand our plan. They are, in agreement with our plan. Now, obviously, they have financial constraints too, so they can't fund every single project that comes to them. But I think we've set ourselves up in a good place where they understand what we're doing, why we're doing it. We've done growth projections, we've done heat maps, we've done everything that we can possibly do to back up, why we need these schools.
So,
Kathy, I agree with you, but I want Anna to understand too, there is no guarantee for matching funds from the state.
No, there isn't. We've done everything that we can to attempt to get those funds.
Try to make that happen, yes.
Right.
We have a proposition before us that has been looked at and relooked at and relooked at again over the last I think 3 years, if I remember correctly. Things have been added, things have been subtracted. The requests that are in this proposal are not something that somebody just threw together. There's been a lot of thought going into it. There's a lot of planning going into it, and pardon me, I can't understand all the questions about what's going on and why is it going on and who's going on and all of that stuff. I think we've got a good plan. It's been worked on by our people, our professional advisors and all of that. And I think we need to go with it and quit trying to beat it up.
If I wasn't asking questions, I wouldn't be doing my job. So there you go.
I understand that you're at a disadvantage because we've been living this for the past few years, and you haven't been as involved. So
and I'm just coming at it from, I was, under the impression we were having the elementary, middle school, Shepherdstown complex, and then, now the middle school's on hold, and I'm wondering, well, is this Ranson Elementary urgent to warrant not building the complex? Things like that.
Well, the first thing you need to do is go right there and talk to those people.
Excuse me?
The first thing you need to do is go right there and talk to those people.
I did, sir.
Check it out.
Said earlier, I did, and I couldn't get a response. I did get a response from Ranson Elementary School, though.
Well, any school out there, you call them up and if you make an appointment with those folks that suits into their time, then they will listen to you.
Thank you. Madam President, can I make a second to Mr. Cable's motion?
okay. And Mr. Cable, your motion was to accept the bond call projects, including the highlighted red items, for the total of $43,532,971. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's how much our bond is.
Correct. Plus
And I'm thankful that Dr. staff worked hard because originally I believe it was around $60 million, and have done a great job at paring that down and doing the best we can to get the community what we need.
Who's that?
Lori Ogden.
All right, so we have a motion on the table to accept the bond call projects for the total of $43,532,971 plus the financing, the cost of issuance, which is about $200,000. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of placing this as the bond call projects for November of 2020?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right. And the one other thing that we do need to decide about the bond call is the length of term. And those were those things that Dr. Gibson sent out earlier. I think the examples they gave us were 25 years and 15 years.
Do we have to have a specific, or can we give a range? Because I think with the way things are going now, we ought to just put it in, and even if we put it in, we can go up to 25. But if the financing is flexible enough, if we can get 15, then that, I would think I don't think we should make up that mind, because we're going to have to look at what the finance people
Well, they sent out all of the information, and if we look at interest rates that they think that we can get, the 15-year would be the 2.2%, and the 25-year would be about 2.5%. Now, these are estimates. These are not exact numbers.
Would you like me to screen share that information, ma'am?
Sure. Thank you. And
First, I will put up the 15-year at that rate.
And the difference between the two, really quickly to sum it up, is once again, if we look at the $250,000 home, for the 15-year, it would be $104, and for the 25-year, it would be $72. So it's a difference of about $30 and change.
I'm very uncomfortable with going with the 25-year loan because I feel that the school system is going to have needs in 15, 16 more years that, you know, we can't foresee at this present time. So I would think we'd want to go with the 15-year loan.
I agree, Mark. And we don't want to encumber boards that far down the road.
I'm uncomfortable with 15-year, but that's the least we can go.
Well, I was not asking to go to the 25 years. I was just saying that we ought to have that option. But if the 15-year is less than the 25, then we need to go to the 15. That's what I was getting at.
Right. I mean, looking at the projects that are on here and looking at the CEFP or the needs that they put down in 10 years, I would feel more comfortable personally going with the 15-year as opposed to the 25-year. Because let's say, you know, we grow and we need to build a high school in, 15 or 20 years. You don't want to go out for a bond while you already have one out if you can help it. So
absolutely.
Agreed.
Okay. All right. So all in favor of pursuing the 15-year financing?
Aye.
Aye.
And Ms. Ogden and Ms. Joy, I couldn't hear you.
I said yes.
Okay. All right. So we all agree on the 15-year financing. And Ms. Joy, I'm sorry, I also had a hard time hearing you with the bond. You did vote yes for the bond, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'm assuming that if that's not a nay, that it's a yay. So if, just please make sure to speak up or abstain from a vote. I'd appreciate it. All right. So Dr. Gibson, that's all that we needed to cover with the bond call. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And Mr. Hunter, if you're still on here, I thank you for hanging in this long and enduring the rest of our meeting, but I think we may have gotten you the answers that you need. So thank you for that. All right, and next up I have a possible executive session.
Yes, ma'am. We have a request for a personnel leave of absence that would require board approval.
All right, is there a motion to go into executive session?
So move, Osborne.
Mr. Osborne, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Cable. All in favor of going into executive session for personnel?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.